Welcome to Empire Building. I'm Wendy Papazan, and together with my 4 co-hosts, we bring you weekly unfiltered conversations about leadership, growing a big empire, and living on your own terms.
I'm Kimber Levitt-Keaty. We are investors and wealth builders with over $75 million in combined net worth.
I'm Sarah Reynolds. We are visionaries who built more than 50 businesses with over $122 million in annual revenue.
I'm Tiffany Fikes. We've led thousands of people and do it all while being pretty good moms.
And I'm Seychelle Van Poole. We are your podcast to learn how to build big businesses and even bigger lives. Welcome back to Empire Building. You've got Seychelle and Wendy here on the podcast today. Hello, hello.
Hello, everybody.
How are you, Wendy? How's your week been?
I am lovely. Yes. Well, the new thing with me is I got new lenses and not glasses. Like I literally got new eyeballs last week. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, I have clarity and vision like never before.
You are true 2020 vision now.
Yeah, it's amazing. Apparently, when I was a baby, I was in an incubator. And back then, the lights sometimes damaged babies' eyes. And so I've had Coke bottle glasses since I was in elementary school. And I was not a candidate for LASIK. And when my dad died earlier this year, I just thought, wow, this is going to really suck with this terrible vision as I age. And so I thought, gosh, there must be some new technology. And I went and I looked into it. And so they take your old lenses out. Your old eyeball, not your eyeballs, but your lenses.
You did not get total eye replacement. Yeah.
Well, you can apparently change the color of your eyes if you want to.
What?
Like that would have been an option. Yeah.
You have beautiful blue eyes, though. I wouldn't change those, babies.
No, I like my color. But so that's rolling into 2025 with clarity of vision and all of that. Yeah.
I love that. So. Well, it actually, your vision ties in perfectly for our episode today because since 2019, you and I, along with several of our besties, have had the chance to do many business ventures together. We've had the opportunity to start our company, Her Best Life, with several of our best friends, and also to get to do the podcast, which is over 250 episodes strong at this point, which is just crazy and almost 1 million downloads. It's just wild. It's absolutely wild. And, when you get into business with friends, you learn a lot. And so I thought it would be fun for us today to share with all of you that if you are thinking about hiring or going into business with friends or family, because I'm going to put them in this category too, there are things we have learned over the last 6+ years that we might be able to pay forward to you. So we thought today we'd give you the good, the bad, the ugly, and the pro tips. If you're going to get into business with your friends or your besties or your family, things to think about so that you have an amazing experience.
Yeah, I love that. And just understand that most partnerships tend to change.
Yeah.
Most partnerships tend to end. And, that's just a natural cycle of things. Most businesses tend to end. So it's very rare that you're going to look up and be in business for the next 150 years with multiple generations of your family. And that's okay. And, understanding what you need to know before getting into something like that's super important. So here's the good. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the very ugly. So the good is really built-in trust. I can say, as the person who's been leading Her Best Life for the last, 5 years, it's been pretty remarkable to have, first of all, an incredible leadership team, but then the amount of trust that we have in each other, just knowing that the trust is there has been made for a remarkable decision-making kind of situation. So I know your work ethic. I know your superpowers. I know what you value. Since we've, you and I have known each other for 15 years now.
Yeah.
And so to have a group of people where you have that kind of level of trust is pretty remarkable. And I think that's why, a lot of times new teams struggle at first because that trust isn't there.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when we decided to start Her Best Life, there were 11 of us in our circle originally, and a lot of us, the majority of us really had a shared vision for wanting to take the company and grow it and, and to take this thing that we had been doing and to grow it and bring it to more people. And we actually had a few that were like, that's not really my vision of what I want. And the beauty of it is when you do it with friends is that You can pick and choose like who you want to be in business with, who you don't want to be in business with. But the really cool part about us getting into business together was a lot of us had a shared vision for what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go. And then we could use our superpowers to plug and play in different areas in the business to make it work. But we all kind of came together with this shared energy and vision that gave rocket fuel to launching something where it could have, I think our first year was probably like 3 years in one.
Yeah.
With how many of us were pushing that company up the hill.
Yeah, definitely shared vision is one of the benefits of it. And then open communication. So I can remember one time we had a particularly difficult situation that we had to deal with. And I don't know if you remember, we were all on Zoom and I just was like, we were kind of at a standstill. And I just said, okay, I want everybody to tell me what they think the solution to this problem would be. And we just kind of went around and we were able to really clearly say what we thought without having to worry about hurting someone's feelings or, it kind of goes back to that built-in trust. But having longstanding friendships just, typically allows you to have an open and honest conversation without kind of tiptoeing around what the challenge could be.
I definitely think that like phrase, assume positive intent, comes in really handy when you're working with friends or family because you've got that built-in trust there. Another thing I really love is, there's two pieces of this. I think motivation and support can mean a couple of different things. I think you motivate each other and support each other in carrying out the mission of the business. I also think it's been really amazing for us in that we've been in business now for almost 6 years, that all of our different founders have gone through seasons.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to give each other motivation and support in those different seasons.
Well, do you remember at Sarah's birthday party when we were all like sitting outside and I was just feeling frustrated and I was like, I'm just going to quit. I'm just done. I'm going to quit. and Sarah just gave me a sideline glance and she's like, no, you're not. We just continued on.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess we're not. We're not even going to talk about it. Okay, fine.
Yeah. And, I think about even on the podcast when we first launched it, like, my team had just fallen apart. My dad's health tanked and we were homeschooling Quinn. And you guys gave me so much grace in that first year that we were launching to be as present as I could be, but also understanding that I had like a dumpster fire of a personal situation going on.
Yeah.
And if it had just been like coworkers, you guys probably would have nailed me to the wall.
Yeah.
But you knew how badly I wanted to contribute and show up and knew that what I was giving was everything I could give at that moment. And, this last year and a half, I feel like I've been able to show up in a really different way.
Yeah.
Coming out of a different season.
Well, I can remember you showing up sometimes to the podcast and just like with red eyes and us being like, okay, tell us what, like,
are you
let
okay
us know
right
what's
now?
going on.
Yeah.
Are you okay? And you just like, just bawling. And, in a non-trust situation.
I couldn't have done that.
You might have just said, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, let's
pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like on the podcast, vulnerability and authenticity were two of our core values. And so I felt really inauthentic showing up, pretending like everything was fine. And like being able to do this with all of you gave me a safety net to feel like I could be real with what was happening and grow through it with a safety net that I wouldn't have had if we had just been four randos put together.
Well, and the last, I would say, good thing about getting into business with your friends is just there's a natural chemistry there. It's just been fun to lead a business with your besties. I mean, how fun is that?
It's so fun.
I never could have imagined like the journey that I've gone on, and also just like the learning from each other too. I'm sure that happens in any business, whether you're with friends or not. But just like brainstorming and decision making and all of that stuff, which can kind of feel tricky and thorny when you don't always know or have that trust with everybody else. It's just been really fun to do that with you guys. Very often it just hasn't felt like a burden.
No, it doesn't. Often it doesn't feel like work. Nick says to me all the time, he's like, if I could figure out a way to get paid to go hang out with my best friends and go impact a bunch of lives. He was like, you guys have figured out the hack where you get to go have a great time.
Yeah.
And you get to impact a lot of people and do a lot of good while also getting to hang out with people you love. It's really magical. Really magical.
It's true. It's true.
Okay, so let's talk about the other side of this, which is the bad.
Yes, the bad.
The bad. Okay, so this one, I can tell you 10 out of 10, I have failed at multiple times, which is blurred boundaries. Or no boundaries. We can just say no boundaries or blurred, whichever one you want to do. I think I've gone from no boundaries to blurred boundaries to some boundaries to much better boundaries. But it's really easy, right, to work. And when your friendship overlaps with that, or your relationship, whether you work with a spouse or a family member or friendship, it can lead to misunderstandings. It can lead to people calling you about work at 10 o'clock at night, or you're out at a family meal and it's getting brought up, or you're at happy hour and it gets brought up. So you just need to be really aware that like boundaries can get blurred, especially when you have a really close personal relationship and a close business relationship. And sometimes it's also okay to be like, hey, can we not talk about work right now? I just want to have fun.
Yeah. I think this truly happens a lot with family, especially, or, spouses getting into business together. And then it's almost like there's no
off button.
Well, and there's nothing new being brought to the
Yes,
conversation.
totally.
So it's like the same people talking about the same things every single day. And even though my husband and I are both in real estate, we work in very different roles. And so we just bring different things to the conversation, which makes it interesting,
I admire all of you out there that literally work right next to your spouse. I think you're amazing because I could not do that. So I really think you're amazing.
So tricky. Well, differing work styles, which, in any work relationship, that's going to happen. And that can be a pro and a con. But just because you're friends doesn't mean you share the same approach to deadlines, communication, conflict resolution, speed. In your case, Seychelles. Sarah and I were talking about the way you were going over the budget yesterday in the meeting, and we were both just like, it's so fast. Seychelles is just, and I'm fast.
You are fast.
I'm a fast processor. I'm probably like
you're fast.
number 2 processor. Yeah. But yesterday you were like,
I knew we only had so much time.
Seychelles.
And so I was like, I'm going to get straight to the point on this. And y'all were like, what?
Yeah. We were just like blinking. I was like, okay, that sounds good. But it's like just a challenge. And, but the good part of that is we are friends. So I can
say
joke
that
about that with you. I know it's your superpower.
But also when it's overused, it can be a weakness too, right?
Yeah.
So it's, but what's funny is until we started working as a board together, I didn't realize how fast my speed was.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we all started working together that I kind of realized like, oh, whoa, okay, I need to adapt sometimes. So,
well, and I would say I've learned so much from you guys about myself because I think we can...
we project for each other. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like a mirror for each other. So that would definitely be one of the good things. It's like, Tiffany will just say something... like, oh, something about me, because I'm so direct and blunt sometimes. And she'll just point it out. And I think that's really good. And a lot of times your teammates who work for you,
they're not going to say it that way.
They would never do that.
Totally. I completely agree with that. Yeah. Like watching your leadership growth over the last 5 years working together has been just so incredible.
Same.
It's so incredible.
Yeah, same.
Okay. So here's one that's really, really sticky that can be bad, real bad. And that is money. Money matters can be really bad when you're working with friends, family, spouses, because not everyone has the same relationship with money, number one. Number two, not everyone has the same level of comfort with savings, with spending. Like, it's very different. And I will tell you, when you have to do cash calls, not everyone's in the same position. When you have to deal with losses, not everyone's always in the same position. When it's profitable and like money's rolling, it's great. Everyone's great. But when it's bad, it can be really bad. And so I just want to encourage you to think about that and also realize this is a lesson I learned early in business because we invested in a company with one of my college best friends and it went real sideways over money. And it was because we gave money and then we didn't set any expectations in the business of how the communication and like the flow was going to go. And then that person, who's a very lovely person, just basically took the money, blew it all, and never really communicated again. about it after that. And we'd had a lot of verbal communications, but not a lot in writing. So just when it comes to money, really be aware of like what your partner's habits are, be aware of where the blind spots and strengths might be in that. And also give yourself permission to talk about money in business together, because I've seen more relationships and marriages for that matter die over money than almost anything else.
And that's when you really want to have a good operating agreement into place, because it's really not an operating agreement. It's an operating disagreement.
Yes.
And it's all good and fine when you get into business with each other, but really that operating agreement spells typically how you get out of business with each other. Because to be clear, those of you that are in the honeymoon phase of getting into business with your friends, or really with anyone, that will end. It will end.
Or it'll go sideways at some point, and you're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's perfectly natural. And I think it happens a lot. Those of you that are in real estate, a lot of people get into partnership at the beginning because one person has strengths and one person has a different kind of strengths, and it seems like a natural match. And at some point, when we get into more of the ugly, you'll understand why sort of people get out of business. So
you'll be like, oh, this is what they were talking about.
Yeah. So that operating agreement is super important.
It also makes sure it's fair. It also makes sure it's fair for people. I always believe when it comes to money, you treat people more than fair. That's always my approach, personally.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things is just relying on the friendship as a safety net, which can just lead to complacency or avoiding tough conversations. So it might be that you'd need to have a tough conversation, but then really the friendship sort of is put before the business relationship.
Yep.
And that can actually lead to the business getting run into the ground.
Oh, for sure.
I've definitely had people who have just neglected putting off a conversation, and the next thing you know, they're not getting out of business with that person. They're getting out of business altogether.
Yeah, that, or like, I definitely have been too afraid to have certain conversations because I'm afraid that, like, part of my team blew up in, what was that, early 2020, right before COVID, was because a lot of the people that worked for us, we'd had, decades of relationships with.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to lose them. And so I was avoiding hard conversations because I was afraid that they were going to leave. And what happened is I avoided the tough conversations, and it blew up anyways because of the conversations I didn't have. So maybe next
Word
time,
to the wise there.
have the conversation, and maybe it won't blow up. And still might have, right? But at least, I would have the clear conscience of knowing that I had had some of those conversations that I probably waited 6 months or a year too long on. So don't do that.
Well, and that's like we were texting back and forth this week about what we were going to record this podcast on. And Seychelle was like, should we talk about the problem with working with friends? And I was like, do we need to have a conversation? Like, are you trying to tell me something?
No, I was like, no, I just think it's a good topic.
Yeah. It's so good. And then really the last thing is unequal effort. And I know for me, this is hard for me. I have a fairness. I just like things to be fair. And I'm sure I have this in my relationship with my marriage too. But, I just give it a lot. Everything I approach, I try not to overschedule, and everything I'm in. And that can just breed resentment if it's not addressed early on. And I know for especially like spouses that are in relationship with each other or family members, it's really important to have really defined roles. So this is your role. This is your superpower. One person's in charge. One person's the leader. I think, for me, it was leading all you guys with Her Best Life for so many years. I just think you're all very powerful leaders. And it was for sure an honor to lead you guys. And you guys always did a good job of deferring to my leadership. And we never really had not that I can remember, never really had any conflict as far as that goes.
No, but I think there were definitely like seasons though where some people were more leaned in and some people were more leaned out. And we definitely had to have strategic conversations around, like, I know when my personal chaos was going on, I was trying to be very upfront and direct with like, this is a season for me, and I will lean in more and carry more of the load as quick as I can, because I know that some of you are carrying, as our executive leadership board, like, we're carrying a much heavier load. So for me, though, I think it's the awareness too of like, I think where it goes really sideways is like, if one person's doing all the work and the other one is completely unaware of how much work the other one is doing,
Yeah.
that's where I think it becomes like disaster zone versus if you're aware of it, then I think there can be like productive conversations around it.
Yeah, that's so smart.
Just like last year, you had a lot going on personally, and it was like, we got you. You've carried a ton. Like,
Yeah.
lean out. We got it. So,
And then as soon as I was not chairman anymore, I'm like, cancel appointment, cancel.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't need to go to any of these things for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all like, great, go for it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a gift.
So let's talk about the ugly. This is like when the bad gets ugly because it's been avoided or you're now having to get out of business together. I think one of the biggest risks is the magic that got you into the relationship, whether it's the marriage, the parent, the, friendship, whatever it is, the business goes so sideways that not only do you lose the business or the relationship in the business, you also lose the friendship.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what happened with, my college friend who I adored. I really went through like a grieving process, not just for large sums of money lost, which is a grief there because that stinks. But really it was the way that it was treated on her end ended the relationship. And it was really sad. And I was not okay with that for like 2 years. Like it was a long time. So, it could jeopardize your relationship. So be really careful and make sure you are getting into business with the people you really do want to be in business with because the other side of that can actually end a relationship.
Yeah. And it could lead to divorce too.
Yeah.
The ugly is egos and power struggles. So typically if you get into business with someone, with a friend, they may be sort of like your equal. So that's why defining the roles is really important. But decision-making styles are completely different. People have different egos around different things. Some people want to be recognized. Some people don't want to be recognized. That can be really sticky in terms of power struggles. And I feel like we've navigated this pretty well.
This isn't the part where I tell you that I've been meaning to talk to you about your ego.
Well, I have a healthy one, so I wouldn't be surprised if you did talk to me.
No. Confidence and ego are different to me, are different things. You're very confident. I don't think you have a giant ego.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
But it's a good reminder. It's just something to think about. It's like, okay, what's really at play here? Is it really a business decision? Is it my ego that's here?
Yes, for sure.
So just asking yourself that question. I have a friend who often says, do I want to be right or do I want to be in a relationship?
I was just about to say that. Yes.
Yeah. And, as someone who was a championship debater, I like to be right. I really do like to be right. So having to kind of check that at the door and asking myself that question, like, is it really that important? Like, do I need to like bring this up now, or can I just let it roll,
That's fair. Yeah. That's really fair. Well, and I think too, the next one of this is unspoken expectations. We all know what the word assume makes out of people, right? Like assume can make lots of things out of lots of people. And assuming that someone knows all the hard work you're doing is an assumption. Assuming somebody else is going to take care of it because you don't have time to take care of it right now is an assumption. And so it can really be messy when there are unspoken expectations of each other and you're not coming to the table to kind of make sure that you're level setting that. And so just make sure that, if you're feeling tension or you're feeling awkwardness, like come to the table and see if there's maybe some unspoken work that's happening behind the scenes. It's making, the equity feel unfair, or maybe it's that someone's expecting something of you and you don't even know it.
I have a great example of that. So when we first started our Her Best Life business, I was leading the meetings and some of my board members were taking a very casual approach to the meetings.
Yes.
And, the meetings were generally early in the morning and people were putting makeup on Zoom and putting, literally getting dressed or showing up, whatever, in a swimsuit in the pool. And that was really hard for me. I was like, hey, I'm here leading the meeting. Like, I don't even know how you're taking notes. Like, how are you taking notes? How can you take notes when you're, in the pool?
How do you know what you just committed to?
Yeah, exactly. So then instead of just simmering and being annoyed about it, I just brought it up and I said, hey, I think we need to have some standards around how we're showing up for the meetings. And so we created some standards and it changed.
Yeah. If we didn't know, we couldn't have fixed it. Like, if the board didn't know, it couldn't have fixed it. I love that.
And some people probably don't care about that.
Yeah.
Some people are probably fine with all that. And just for me, I was not fine with it. So
I think that's fair. You know what? You were the chair. So, and the leader sets the tone. So
yeah,
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Well, we already talked about the conflict avoidance a little bit. So the fear of damaging the friendship may result in avoiding necessary but difficult conversations. Susan Scott wrote a great book called Fierce Conversations.
Highly recommend.
Highly recommend.
Changed my life.
For any leader, especially if you're going into business with a friend, you want to definitely read that book.
That book is amazing.
Yeah. So they talk about the gradually then suddenly principle there, which especially when you're avoiding the hard thing, it's kind of like what you were saying. It's like you avoided the hard thing and then the hard thing happens anyway.
Yeah. It happens anyways. I was like, well, that was a great lesson. One, I think about it too, like, I don't know if she describes this in the book, but the visual that her book gave me was like, meaningful conversations are like little pebbles. And every time you have a meaningful conversation, you're like putting a little pebble down and creating a path or a road. The more meaningful, like intentional conversations you have that sometimes are difficult, create this little path or this little road over time. And if you don't, you're taking them to the side of the road and dropping it in a pile. And the pile eventually becomes so big that it actually blocks the road.
It's like a wall.
Yeah, it becomes a complete wall in between the two of you that you can't climb over, you can't get around, you can't see around, and that's what creates the issue. And so I always think about that when I'm like wanting to avoid a hard conversation. It's like, oh, I could either build the road or I can build the wall. Which one do I want?
Yeah.
So,
and you want to have it right away.
Yes, right away.
That's what I've learned. It's like, nip that in the bud.
Yeah. One, I even say too, like, I want to bring this up before I'm frustrated, resentful, or angry about it. Like, I'm not mad right now, but I'm observing it, so I want to bring it up now. This one is the opposite of that, which is sometimes there are people that enjoy public confrontation or feel like that is appropriate. And when you're working with family, having a confrontation in front of team members is not appropriate. Have that behind closed doors.
You have this look in your face like this has happened to you before.
I don't know. So. Maybe it's happened. Maybe it's not appropriate. Not naming names. I'm just going to put it out there. But with friends or family or spouses, don't have your disputes in public. Like, go, like, have a code word, a code signal, like, send a text, hey, can we have a quick conversation? And then go have it behind closed doors. Because it can really undermine your relationship, but it also undermines how safe people feel around you as team members. And you don't realize that because you two are in close rapport. And so sometimes you might be having a very public dispute in a healthy way. And it's actually, you're not mad at each other, but it's coming across that way to everyone in the room that's not married to you or a parent to you or whatever, right? Like it can get awkward. So just be aware that like your comfort and your conflict communication publicly might be different than other people in the room.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, and we're just going to end with a few tips for success.
Pro tips.
Our last ugly. And it's just like we talked about. Establish clear roles and responsibilities. Define who does what to prevent overlap and resentment. And write it down. Put it on a piece of paper. It's not enough to have a conversation about it because anybody who's ever had a conversation before knows that one person's going to come out of that conversation with one thought in their head and the other person's going to come out with a different thought in their head. So after every conversation where you're defining roles and responsibilities, you're going to write them down. You're going to maybe even email them to each other. Hey, this is my understanding about what we talked about moving forward. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what you're going to do.
It's so good. It's so good. And the second part of that is have your partnership agreement in writing. Like, write down how the business is going to operate, what percentage you each own, who's going to get paid what. The decision-making processes are really important. Like, do we need to vote on a certain number of things? Or if like a decision is over a certain dollar amount, do we both need to be on board with that decision? I love that. Like, no one makes a decision more than $3,000 for the company or something like that. Just to have a checks and balance. And then the most important one to me, which Wendy said in the beginning, was the partnership agreement actually decides how you get out of business together. And so it takes the emotion out. If you're ever having to exit business with each other, you already have pre-agreed terms that feel fair to everyone. And if you choose to be more than fair, great. But at least everyone has already agreed and decided these are the fair terms that we feel good about if we're exiting.
It's like having a lease. you know? So as someone who's been a landlady for over 20 years, when somebody comes to me and they want to get out of the rental that they're in, I just say, let's look to the legal agreement that we both signed and we'll see how we need to approach this. And what that does is it takes all the emotion out of it. And there will be emotion when you're getting out of business with a friend. There just will be emotion. And so what it does is it just takes the emotion out of it. And you've got to you're probably going to have to hire a lawyer to help you with that. And I think when we get into business with friends, we're like, oh, we don't want to spend the money. It's not important. Everything's going to go well. You know, those of us that are in sales tend to be like somewhat optimistic. And when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to be somewhat optimistic. Trust us, trust us. We know that having a way to get out of that where it's fair and equitable and a win-win is just the best thing that you can do to sort of save that friendship, you know?
That's so true. So true.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and then the next one is schedule regular check-ins. It's so important to be on the same page and to have a pre-scheduled time that's blocked out. Like we're actually getting ready to meet today, I think, to look at scheduling for, you know, our next 6 months worth of podcast episodes, right? And we just, on our board meeting for Her Best Life, just looked at, are these meeting times working? And is the frequency working? Like you need regular check-ins. They need to be protected on your calendar. And you can always change it, but they need to be on there.
That's so smart. So we got into we did a merger with another team in our marketplace, and we have quarterly check-ins. You know, we're 2 years in, we have quarterly check-ins, and we come to the quarterly check-in with, let's talk about how we're doing and how we're feeling about the partnership. There's no hard feelings. You know, it's not like I'm just throwing something out. It's like, hey, we've known this is coming, right? So if I have an issue or they have an issue, we can just bring it up and like, let's figure out a way to work it out.
I love that.
And then learn to lean into your superpowers, right? You know, we've learned so much about each of our strengths and our blind spots, and just learn to just lean into your superpowers. I often see partnerships, especially between spouses, where there's some kind of weird gender-related role, you know, and I don't want to say which is which, but a lot of times it's like, oh, you're a woman, you're more operational. Like, I'm going to be more of a salesperson. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, do a, strengths finder with each other. Do the DISC assessment. Like, where are your strengths? What are they? And using that sort of neutral, unbiased assessment, move forward with your roles.
I love that. Well, and then especially family or spouses, but I think friends too, respect personal time, respect boundaries. Like, I will say sometimes too, if I'm texting something late at night and it's a business thing, I will say like, for tomorrow, like sending this, but it's for tomorrow. Like, or I will send an email to go out at 8 a.m. the next morning, even though I may be writing it at 10 o'clock at night. Like, just be aware that like, if you are close, they may feel like they need to read it right away because it came from you.
Yeah.
And they care about you.
They're your bestie.
Yeah. And so like, it may though interrupt bedtime with a kid and make the kid feel like you're not paying attention and present with them, or it might interrupt date night. So just be aware that like you are important in your business partner or your friend's life or significant person's life. And when you send something, it's going to matter. So just be aware of that.
I love that. And one of the things that we've done is we have a Slack channel for our friend stuff, for those of us that are on the board, and we have a Slack channel for the work stuff. It's different, it's definitely different. And then the last one is just be honest and direct. So address issues early and often and openly before we escalate. Set ground rules on how you want to handle conflict. Some people are a quick processor. Some people are a slow processor. So sometimes it can be very helpful to say, hey, listen, I want to talk about X at this time. Are you okay with that? And here are my thoughts, versus like just showing up in somebody's office.
That's what I try to do now.
Yeah, because you're such a quick processor, Seychelle, and nobody can beat you in a speed argument.
I don't even want it. Like, It just is. It just is what it is. And so I know, like, and Sarah has said on the podcast before, right? Like, she's a very logical problem solver. And so she wants all the facts and all the figures, and she wants to take time to really think about it and process it before we come to the table with decisions. And so I've learned, especially on a board meeting, like if we're coming to some things, I try to send her notes ahead of time of like my thoughts and logic on something. So that way she has time to process it and ask questions before we're getting together. And it's made our relationship so much better because I think she felt like I was pressuring her to make decisions,
yeah,
which is unfair to her as a business partner. And I was feeling like I was having to be defensive on it, right? When I wasn't trying to be that way. Like I was just already there.
I mean, if I have something that I need like to spitball in the moment that's got to have an answer, I mean,
Yeah, you call me.
hey, Seychelle, you got a minute? You're always quick to respond.
Yep.
And then if I want Sarah's thoughts, I will definitely say, hey, you know what? Here's kind of what I'm thinking. And then invariably she says,
And she's brilliant.
well, yeah, invariably she says, I need to think about it and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
And she always comes with these things that like are such a different, amazing perspective. Like, and it's so awesome. Like we didn't know that when we got into business together.
No.
But having learned that about each other has allowed us to be in better relationship together too.
Yeah. Well, such a good episode. I love that you had this idea to do this episode, and I'm glad it didn't turn into a therapy session where you wanted to get out of business with me. So happy about that.
That goes into the public confrontation part. You like show up, I've just written the script of my exit.
It'd be so awkward. So awkward. So awkward.
Dear
so
Wendy,
awkward.
Today is my last day on the podcast. And I would
I'm
like to
sure.
tell you in front of all of our friends.
Yeah. I
No,
love
please
it.
don't kick me
love
off.
it.
I love it.
Yeah. So getting into business, one of the best things that's ever personally happened to me. I've learned and grown so much. And just knowing that, you know, it's probably going to be a season. I hope it's a very long season for all of us. And it's just good to know what you need to know before getting into it. So
Yeah.
don't forget, guys, go out there and build your big business with your friends and even bigger life.
That's right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information.